Imagine for a second that you're sitting in a quiet room, drinking a coffee, and a door opens. In walks someone who looks remarkably like you, but they're 20 years older. They sit down, lean in, and they don't want to talk about your 401k or the interest rates on your mortgage. They want to talk about the frequency you're currently tuned into, and they're desperate to help you change the station. This is what I call the future self frequency. For the last 15 years, I've had a front row seat to these conversations, working with clients in their 70s and 80s as they look back on the decade you're living through right now. If they could send a message back through time, it wouldn't be a list of stock picks. It would be a warning about the magical fourth triangle you're currently standing in, that rare, brief window where your health, your money, and your time finally overlap. We often spend our 30s and 40s grinding, telling ourselves that the real living starts at retirement. But when you hit 70, you realize that time isn't just a resource, it's an accelerating asset. I've seen the patterns. I've heard the same regrets over and over again, and let me tell you, one of them is a trap that even I find myself falling into daily. It's the quiet, persistent voice telling you to play the status game, to buy things to prove you've made it. But your 70-year-old self knows better. They know that while money can make more money, it can't make more time. They're screaming at you to stop waiting for someday, because, for them, someday has already arrived, and the window for go-go years is beginning to close. It might be too late for them to change their 50s, but the frequency is clear, and the transmission is meant for you. Throughout this journey, we're going to break down the lessons they've shared, from the math of buying back your life to the identity shift that changes how you see yourself. It's time to stop running away from a stressful career and start running toward a life of purpose. Your future self is waiting. Let's listen to what they have to say. Life, when you look at it through the eyes of someone who's lived 7 decades, boils down to a shifting balance of 3 specific resources: time, health, and money. Most of us spend our lives chasing the one we're missing, rarely noticing the brief moment they finally align. In your 20s and 30s, you likely had all the time in the world and the health of a thoroughbred, but you were probably checking your bank account before buying a decent pair of shoes. You had the engine and the road, but no fuel. Then you hit midlife, the 40s and early 50s. This is where the money usually starts to show up. You've built the career, the assets are growing, and you're still physically capable. But suddenly, the road disappears. You're working 60 hours a week, managing a family, and your calendar is a battlefield. You have the fuel and the engine, but no road to drive on. Eventually, retirement arrives in your late 60s or 70s. You finally have the money and the time to do whatever you want. But here's the cold truth. The engine is starting to wear down. Maybe the knees don't handle a walking tour of Paris like they used to, or the energy for a week-long trek just isn't there. You have the fuel and the road, but the engine is flickering. But right now, in your 50s and early 60s, you are standing in a hidden equilateral triangle. This is the triple threat. The only window in your entire existence where you have enough money to afford the adventure, enough health to actually enjoy it, and if you're intentional, enough time to make it happen. It's a magical intersection that feels like it will last forever, but it's actually the most fleeting stage of all. The danger is staying in that busy stage 2 for too long. I see people who keep delaying that trip or putting off that hobby because they're addicted to the grind or waiting for a perfect number in their bank account. They don't realize they're trading their most vibrant years for a slightly larger retirement fund they might be too tired to use later. Navigating this intersection means recognizing that wealth isn't just about the balance in your portfolio. It's about the balance of these 3 forces. If you miss this window, you aren't just losing time, you're losing the version of yourself that can best use it. If the triple threat is the frame of your life, then energy is the picture inside it. We often talk about time management, as if we're just moving blocks of hours around on a calendar. But 70-year-olds will tell you that an hour spent exhausted is not the same as an hour spent energized. To truly navigate your 50s, you have to stop auditing your calendar and start auditing your energy. Most of us have spent decades dividing our lives into 2 primary categories: career and relationships. We give our best hours to our professional goals and our remaining hours to our families, often feeling like heroes for the sacrifice. But there is a third, silent category that people in their 70s look back on with the most concern when it's neglected: recovery time or renewal time. Renewal time isn't just vegging out in front of a screen. It's the specific set of activities that actually put fuel back in your tank. It's the stuff that makes time fly, whether that's hiking a trail, losing yourself in a woodworking project, or even the shock of a cold plunge. When you ignore this bucket, you aren't just working hard. You are actually harming your career and your relationships because you're showing up as a diminished version of yourself. Think of it like a battery. You wouldn't expect your phone to run for a week without a charge, yet we expect our bodies and minds to sustain high-level stress for years without intentional renewal. The 70-year-olds I speak with describe this as a non-negotiable asset. They've learned that stamina isn't about how much you can endure. It's about how well you can recharge. When you do an energy audit, you begin to see where you're leaking power. Are you saying yes to social obligations that drain you while skipping the tennis match that rejuvenates you? During these busy midlife years, the advice is clear. Identify what truly renews you and treat it with the same respect you give a board meeting or a family wedding. If you don't prioritize your own recovery now, you won't have the stamina to enjoy the freedom you're working so hard to build. When you finally reach that triple threat and start getting your energy back, a new, quieter problem often emerges. It's the question of who you actually are when you aren't the director, the partner, or the founder. For decades, your career has likely been the biggest slice of your life's pie chart. We spend 40 years building a title, and it becomes a comfortable suit we wear every day. But what happens when you have to take that suit off? I remember a client in his mid-50s who was at the top of his professional game. He was successful by every metric, but he realized something chilling. If his business disappeared tomorrow, he didn't know who would be left in the mirror. To fix this, he used a simple tool called the identity pie chart. He drew a circle and looked at how his time, mental energy, and sense of worth were divided. For him, career was a massive 80% chunk. Family, fitness, and faith were just tiny, neglected slivers on the edge. He decided to change the geometry of his soul. He rediscovered a passion for rock climbing, something he'd loved in his 20s but had buried under 30 years of spreadsheets. He didn't just do it on weekends, he integrated it into his sense of self. He started seeing himself as a climber who happened to run a company, rather than a businessman who sometimes went to the gym. Slowly, the climber's slice of the pie began to expand. He wasn't cutting back on his career because he was losing his edge. He was cutting back because he was diversifying his self-worth. This isn't just about finding a way to kill time. It's about survival. When the day finally comes to walk away from the paycheck, if career is your entire pie, you aren't just retiring, you're disappearing. The 70-year-olds who are the happiest today are the ones who spent their 50s intentionally growing their other slices. They realized that a diverse identity is the ultimate hedge against the emotional void of retirement. Start looking at your chart today and ask yourself, if that career slice went to zero tomorrow, would there be enough of you left to still feel whole? Think about the yes phase of your 20s and 30s. Back then, yes was the fuel. You said yes to every project, every late-night networking event, and every extra responsibility because you were building a foundation. That yes is exactly what earned you your seat at the table. But as you move through your 50s and step into that magical fourth triangle, the rules of the game change completely. The very thing that built your success, the habitual yes, can now become the primary threat to your freedom. I see this all the time with people who have finally reached financial stability but find themselves still running on the old treadmill. They are physically present at social obligations or work committees, but mentally, they are checking their watches, wondering where their day went. The advice from those looking back from their 70s is remarkably consistent. You have to learn the art of the strategic refusal. In the second half of life, no isn't a rejection of others. It's a profound yes to yourself. When you say no to that draining social event, you are saying yes to a morning walk that clears your head. When you say no to just one more project, you are saying yes to the recovery time your stamina depends on. It's about respecting your own needs and desires as much as you've respected your professional obligations for decades. This includes saying no to social pressure, work commitments that no longer serve your purpose, and sometimes even to long-term friends if the relationship has become a source of drain rather than joy. The stakes are higher than they look. Every yes you give to something that doesn't align with your purpose is a direct withdrawal from your limited pool of healthy, active years. By mastering the strategic refusal, you create a protective barrier around your magical stage. You stop being a passenger in your own schedule and start becoming the curator of your experiences. Remember, the goal isn't just to have a retirement. It's to have the version of yourself that is still vibrant enough to enjoy it. While buying back your time through arbitrage is a powerful mathematical shift, there is another investment that offers a return so high it almost feels like cheating the system. It's what I call the age reversal dividend. This isn't about vanity or trying to look younger for the sake of a mirror. It's about the raw, functional ability to stay in that magical triangle for as long as humanly possible. I'll never forget a client who came to see me a few years ago. She was 69 years old and had recently lost her husband unexpectedly. When we first met, she was understandably lost, her energy was low, and she looked every bit her age, carrying the heavy weight of grief and the stress of a life in transition. We handled the necessary paperwork and talked about her future goals, travel, deepening her faith and her health, but she was clearly struggling just to stay afloat. A year later, she walked back into my office for a follow-up, and I genuinely almost didn't recognize her. I had to do a double take. She was vibrant, her skin was glowing, and she moved with a lightness that I hadn't seen before. She looked like she had aged backward by at least 15 years. If I hadn't known her birth date, I would have guessed she was in her early 50s. She hadn't gone under the knife or found some secret fountain of youth. Instead, she had spent that year aggressively investing in her mental and physical engine. She started a daily practice of yoga and strength training, and she committed herself to meditation and spending time in scripture. She told me, "I feel like I've added 10 healthy years to my life." That is the age reversal dividend in action. In your 50s, you have a choice to make about the slow-down phase of your life. We all know that eventually, things will start to decelerate, but you have the power to push that date further and further into the future. By prioritizing your physical and mental health now, you aren't just staying fit. You are literally expanding the borders of your go-go years. You are ensuring that when you finally have the time and the money to see the world, you actually have the knees, the heart, and the energy to climb the stairs of the Eiffel Tower or hike the trails you've been dreaming about for decades. The best time to start this investment was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. While buying back your time through arbitrage is a powerful mathematical shift, there is another investment that offers a return so high it almost feels like cheating the system. It is what I call the age reversal dividend. This isn't about vanity or trying to look younger for the sake of a mirror. It is about the raw, functional ability to stay in that magical triangle for as long as humanly possible. I remember a client who first came to see me shortly after her husband had passed away unexpectedly. She was 68 at the time, and like many facing deep grief, she felt adrift. When she walked into the office that first year, she looked tired, her energy was low, and she was just trying to survive the logistics of her new reality. We talked about her goals, travel, health, and deepening her faith, but she was clearly in a slow-go mindset, carrying the heavy weight of her loss. 1 year later, we met again to go over some tax planning strategies. When she walked into the office, I genuinely almost didn't recognize her. She was vibrant, her skin looked healthy, and she moved with a lightness and renewal that hadn't been there before. She hadn't had work done. Instead, she had created a new set of habits centered on her physical and mental well-being. She had started regular yoga, consistent strength workouts, and spent her mornings in meditation and scripture. She told me quite simply, "I feel like I added 10 healthy years to my life." She had figured out how to make more time, not by adding minutes to the clock, but by expanding the quality and capacity of the years she has left. In your 50s, this is the ultimate hedge against the future. We all know that eventually, things will start to decelerate, but you have the power to push that date further and further back. By prioritizing your physical health and mental clarity now, you ensure that when you finally have the money and the freedom to see the world, you actually have the body and the energy to climb the stairs of the cathedral or hike the trails you've been dreaming about for decades. The goal isn't just to reach retirement. It's to arrive there at your absolute peak, ready to actually live the life you've spent 40 years funding. We need to talk about the seventh piece of advice, and I'll be honest, this is the one I struggle with the most. It's the common trap of the status game. We often find ourselves buying things not because we truly need them, but to signal our success or to feel like we still belong in a certain circle. It's a game played by many of us in our 50s as a way to fight back against the quiet fear of becoming irrelevant in a world that seems obsessed with youth. There is a deep psychological drive at play here. We seek validation and recognition, wanting a visible trophy that says, "I've made it." For some, it's a high-end watch. For others, it's a luxury car. We use these symbols to affirm our self-worth and project an image of power and stability. I recently found myself wanting a fancy watch for exactly these reasons. I wanted a visible sign of my hard-earned success. But the 70-year-olds I work with have a different perspective. They've seen the excitement of the big purchase fade faster than the new car smell. I remember a client who was 6 months into his retirement. He decided it was finally time to pull the trigger on his dream car, a Porsche. He could afford it, his plan was solid, and he felt he had earned it. But when we talked a few months later, the tone had changed. He told me the thrill had lasted about 2 weeks. After that, it was just a car that required maintenance and took up space. Looking back, he realized he was chasing an image rather than an experience. His advice was a revelation. Rent your dreams before you buy them. If you've always wanted that dream car or a vacation home in a specific city, don't buy it immediately. Spend the money to rent it for 30 days. Live with it. See if the joy persists once the novelty wears off. He realized he could have dropped a few $1,000s to rent that Porsche for a month, had his fun, and saved himself a massive investment in something that didn't bring lasting happiness. By renting the experience, you protect your capital and, more importantly, you ensure that your spending aligns with true joy rather than a fleeting ego mirage. There is a common myth we often repeat to ourselves as we approach the finish line, that once we retire, our expenses will naturally drop. We imagine a quieter life where we spend less because the commute is gone, the professional wardrobe is retired, and our lifestyle simplifies. But the advice from those who have already crossed that line is that the exact opposite often happens, especially in those first few years. This is the start of what is known as the go-go years, a period defined by that brief equilateral triangle of time, money, and health that creates a unique and powerful sense of urgency. When you finally have the freedom you've worked decades for, the realization hits. It is now or never. You want to take those big international trips, invest in the hobby you've deferred, or finally tackle the home projects that have been on the back burner. I've seen many clients who were certain they would spend a modest amount each month, only to find their first year of retirement expenses were significantly more than they anticipated. They weren't being reckless. They were simply seizing the window while their health was at its peak. This spending spike isn't a failure of planning. It's a byproduct of being intentional with your resources while you still have the energy to enjoy them. However, it can be a source of stress if you haven't prepared for the reality of it. The wisdom from those in their 70s is to stop guessing and start tracking your actual expenses now, while you are still in your 50s. By using a tool to automatically categorize your spending, you move from guesswork to real, actionable data. This gives you a clear picture of what your go-go years will actually cost, allowing you to adjust your plan before you even step away from your career. Ultimately, preparing for this spending spike isn't about restriction. It's about providing yourself with clarity and confidence. It's about ensuring that when you reach those first few years of freedom, You can lean into those now or never moments without hesitation, knowing your financial plan was built for the excitement of real life. The final trap many of us fall into is thinking that the finish line is merely a place to stop. After years in a stressful, high-pressure career, it's natural that all we can think about is finally obtaining rest and leisure. For the hard-charging professional, the idea of doing nothing looks like the ultimate prize. But the clients who have already crossed that line will tell you that 6 months into a retirement built only on leisure, things start to feel surprisingly hollow. They often find themselves asking if this is really all there is. The real secret to a vibrant second half isn't just about what you're retiring from. It's about what you're running toward. You have to shift your focus from a retirement of rest to a retirement of purpose. This is the moment to reach back into your teens or your 20s and rediscover the passions you set aside when life became a series of obligations. Whether it's a craft you abandoned, a cause you want to serve, or a sport like rock climbing, integrating these interests into your life now ensures you aren't just filling time, but fueling your soul. Growth doesn't come simply from the years we accumulate. It comes from reflecting on the experiences we've had. You have the most incredible stage of your life ahead of you, but it requires you to be intentional. It's never too late to pivot and decide how you want this next chapter to unfold. Take the advice of those who have gone before you. Pick 2 or 3 lessons that resonated with you and write them down. Sit with them on a quiet morning with a cup of coffee and think about how they fit into your future. Your best years aren't behind you. They are waiting for you to claim them with purpose.